Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Show, your source for insightful analysis and enlightening discussions. I'm Michael Bull, your host to the world of commercial real estate. You know, when making business, investment, and real estate decisions, it's important to consider the trends and the future of jobs, spending, migration, and other key demographic factors. Well, today we'll look into these trends and how you can use this knowledge to power your business and your real estate decisions. Please welcome my first guest, Dr. Ray Torto. He's Global Chairman of Research at CBRE, or former Global Chief Economist. He's now a lecturer at Harvard. Ray, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Well, I appreciate you joining us on the phone there from Marblehead. You're north of Boston, so you're right on the harbor, right?
I am on the harbor, so if we hear a little noise of horns or boats or motors, I apologize in advance.
It'll make it more exciting. Well, to get us started here, you know, I think it's really important to consider migration and jobs and kind of the spending habits of the demographics around the U.S. when you're making these decisions, isn't it?
Well, it really is. And when I talk in my class or when I'm giving a lecture in front of associations or groups, I often talk about the fact that commercial real estate is the economy in a box. So everything that happens to the economy happens to commercial real estate, and except we do commercial real estate in a box, right? We make things in manufacturing boxes, we distribute them in distribution boxes, we sell them in retail boxes, we count the money in office boxes, right? So, you know, how the economy goes has a big effect on real estate, and you know what we're going to talk about a little bit today, demographics, is a very important part of that, particularly in terms of the long-term trends, as opposed to what I would call the cyclical trends, you know, the up and down of the economy. But long-term, you know, what drives the demand for real estate is people, and you know, the jobs they have, the incomes they're making, and the preferences they have for where they want to live and where they want to work.
Right. And you look at the baby boomers, we all know that, you know, they've been a big factor in the business and industry and real estate. Now we have the millennials. If you will, describe a little bit these different groups for us, if you will.
Yes. Well, millennials is the young guys, as I kind of been sort of in the boomer category myself. But millennials are generally people that are born after 1980. And I should mention, Michael, that there is no firm definition of millennials, boomers, Gen X, you know, silent generation. Everybody sort of has a little different variation of the definition. So it's a little bit loose. But generally speaking, the millennials are a cohort that are in the age group of somewhere between 18 and 33. You know, they were born after 1980. The boomers themselves, which is the other large cohort, was born from 1946 to 1964. And the reason millennials are important is that they are the largest group of demographics, or the largest cohort right now. They're even bigger than the boomers. And you and I have been following commercial real estate for a long time, and we know how the boomers have affected commercial real estate demand and created long-term profits or demises for people's fortunes. And so I think real estate investors, developers, transaction people have to keep an eye on what the millennials are doing. I should also mention to you that the millennials are really the best educated cohort of young adults that we've ever had in our history. They're also sometimes referred to as digital natives because they are so savvy with technology. And let me ask you, Michael, have you ever done a selfie?
I have to admit I have, but it was with my daughter. So
she was the instigation, right?
That's right.
Well, I was reading a little bit about millennials, and I one of the authors said that you know, they have 55% of them have done selfies, and I had a laugh at that and sort of said to myself, well, I've never done a selfie, even though I do have a millennial living in my home. So they're quite, you know, they're digital natives is one thing. They're very extensive use of Snapchat and chat, right? That's the term, and Facebook, and they're also very slow at marrying compared to earlier generations in our society. They really have a very low marriage rate, around 26%. Whereas if we go way back to the 1960s, generally speaking, young people were married. 65% of young people were married back then. So they're really a very different group of people, and they're not. They're very racially diverse. They're the best educated cohort. They're tech savvy, and all of these things are just a description of who they are.
Right.
However, the real important thing is what do they mean for real estate in terms of where real estate should be built, developed, bought and sold, and so on. And the way I kind of look at it, Michael, is that research has shown that jobs follow people. So what happens in a society or an economy is people decide where they want to live, and then firms in retail space and so on develop around that. And what happened in the 1950s and 60s is the baby boomers and the silent generation decided they wanted to live in suburbs. And suburbs developed for a lot of reasons that we probably don't have time to go into, but they developed, and part of the reason was that's where people wanted to live. And of course, that led to the development of housing and firms being in the suburbs and highways being built around cities. And you're probably not old enough to remember, but there was a time when in this country everybody thought cities were dead, that they would never recover. So this had a very dramatic effect on commercial real estate. So what's starting to happen with the millennials is that this is a cohort that is saying, well, we don't like all of that commuting. We'd like to be in a walking area. We like to live in cities, and not just cities, but in densely populated urban areas. And we want to have environments which are what we call live, work, play. So all three things can be done in proximity. And this is having a pretty significant effect on where residential developments are being built and the success of those developments, and it having some change in the structure of our downtown and suburban communities.
And so you believe that this is going to create more demand or continued demand for more urban housing and help the central business districts as far as the office market goes?
I think it is. In fact, I can cite examples of this happening in a lot of our major cities, from San Francisco to Atlanta to New York City to places here in Boston, which I'm very familiar with. And what's happened, just to use Boston as an example, if you think about housing and the value of housing based on its price, the price of housing in the Boston area reached a peak in 2006 before the Great Recession, and then everything sort of went down 20-30%. The recovery to date has been in the city of Boston and the urban areas around Boston, Cambridge and Somerville and places like that, if you're familiar with Boston. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because this generation is wanting to live in the inner city. They want to live closer to work, and they also are looking to live closer to work and also to places they play, where they go out to dinner or they go to theater or they go to improv or whatever else. So it's a combination of live, work, play. And what we've seen in real estate is that it's not only just a urban-suburban issue, but I often tell the story, if we got time, Michael, about what's happening right in the middle of the city of Boston, where things are changing. For example, in the city of Boston, the center of the city of Boston for the last 350 years has been at the intersection of two roads called Congress and State. And the reason I say it's the center, it's where business was begun back 350 years ago. It's where it's always been for 350 years. But that's starting to change, where that area is considered to be one-dimensional. That is, it's just business. It doesn't have a good living environment. It doesn't have a good social environment. And because of that, other areas of the city are sprouting up and doing very well in terms of their commercial real estate investments.
All right, we're going to take a short break here. We're talking to Dr. Ray Torto about how demographics are affecting real estate. We'll be right back. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you in part by your friends at Bull Realty. When your business requires proven performance, visit bullrealty.com or call 800-408-BULL. Welcome back to the Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. Thanks for being with us. Today we're talking about demographics' impact on business and real estate decisions. And my guest is Dr. Ray Torto. He's the former Global Chief Economist with CBRE. And Ray, you talked about the millennials getting married later and some of the changes in their lifestyle. Some people are wondering if this apartment market could get overheated. The apartment industry is just doing extremely well. Some cities are having record amounts of new construction. What do you think this demographic impact of the millennials will have on apartments, and how long is this great market going to last?
Those are easy questions, Michael. Thanks. Well, let's start with sort of where the demand for apartments is coming from, and I would say that the construction we're seeing, particularly in cities, is being driven by the millennials' desire to live, work, and play in urban areas, and so that's a real trend. And those of us who look at demographics think that trend is going to continue at least through 2020, 2021. So when you ask the question, well, are we overbuilding right now apartments in some of these cities? My answer to that is I do not think so. I think we're building a little bit more than we need. So I expect to see in 2015 the vacancy rates in a number of these cities to rise by 50 to 100 basis points. But to me, that's not overbuilding. Right now, if I remember correctly, the national vacancy rate for apartments is sub 5%, and that's a pretty tight market. It's really the tightest market they've had in my memory. But coming back to the millennials and the apartment market, what's happening here in particular is that you got to be thinking, if you're building or buying an apartment building, will it be competitive 5-10 years from now? Let me give you what I mean by that. What's starting to change, for example, is that the requirements for an apartment building is that do you have an electric charging station in your parking garage? Imagine if you're in a city, you own an old-style apartment building, and you're competing with newer buildings which do have electric charging stations. Where's the tenant going to go, right? Especially if they have an electric charging car. Other things you've got to think about in terms of how technology is disrupting, as well as millennials are disrupting things. And again, as I said about millennials, they're digital natives, right? They're very much into the modern way of living. So, do you have storage, not only storage, but refrigerated storage for groceries being delivered during the day while people are at work? That's just a small consideration that's got to be built into the plans of what you're building. And so a lot of these newer apartment buildings are on the cusp of this modern technology. And so it's not just that they're building newer ones and looking at it, it's more supply, but it's a different kind of supply. It's a supply that's anticipating the needs of the millennials.
Yeah, and those are good points. And while I have you on the phone, I want to ask your opinion on the demographics impact on the office market. Here you are, you're working today, you're working from home, and there's a lot of companies that are reducing their expenses and cramming a lot more people in larger and smaller spaces. What do you think about demographics impact on the office market?
Well, we're also seeing a very big impact in this sense, that jobs follow people. So if these digital natives who have going to be very important to the innovation economy of the future, where new ideas are a very important part of economic growth. You want to be in a place where you can attract that labor. You not only want to attract them or bring them into your firms, but you also want to be able to retain them. And if you're out on a highway somewhere in the suburbs and all the digital natives or the millennials are saying, I want to live in the urban area where I have a live, work, play environment, you're going to find it very difficult to attract that engineer, that software designer, that intellectual professional, and retain them because they're going to want to work in another location. So that's why we're starting to see firms follow these people, and then what they're doing is they're creating office space which is much more open than the traditional ones that you and I maybe are familiar with. That, no longer is there the corner office. It's more open space, innovative space. There's a lot of things in the traditional office that have gone by the wayside. Things like telephones. Everybody's got their own cell phone or mobile phone. Things like desktop computers. Everybody's got laptop computers. I teach a class, and I put up a list of things that were in the old office buildings and offices of the past, and one of the things I put on the list was a Rolodex. And a student raised his hand. These are 29, 30-year-old students. And he raised his hand. What's a Rolodex?
Rolodex. And remember typewriters, too?
Before my time,
I was in a store with my daughter and son, this old antique store, and there was some typewriters sitting there, and my son actually looked at them and asked me what they were.
Doesn't that date you, huh?
Yeah. I said, well, look over there. That's called a record player over there, too.
Yeah. So they're having a big effect on real estate in a lot of ways that are very subtle. One other thing, too, that we talk millennials, but the other thing that's happening because of these changes and because of demographics is how the boomers are affecting the apartment market, not the office market so much. But what I mean by this is that in the 50s and 60s, the older generation moved out to the suburbs. They bought the 4-bedroom house, and it's 2 or 3 stories. And they're getting a little in their 60s, and they're saying, we need 1-floor living. We don't want to be going up and down stairs. And they're looking into the cities, which are becoming more vibrant because of what the millennials are doing. And they're saying, gee, it'd be nice to have a condo in the city and have 1-floor living and, be able to walk outside and get groceries and go to, entertainment events and so on. And so that's another part of what's driving the economic growth of cities right now. It's not just the millennials, but there's another generation that's looking at this and saying, for my own reasons, I'm looking to be in an urban area, and I'm looking for 1-floor living. I was driving around the Boston area with an investor just a couple months ago, and we were looking for buying a large, what you would call a garden variety apartment complex. And we drove into one place, and we drove in. As we noticed right away, they were building 2-floor condominiums. We just turned around and left. We didn't even sit down with the broker. Didn't even want to think about it. And I think this is a very competitive world, so you have to be thinking about how demographics and technology are changing the nature of real estate. And as you said before, all law firms are using less space. A lot of real estate folks, a lot of firms are using less space, and so this is having a big effect on office space as well as residential.
Yeah, it certainly is. And then I look back now, I think in my future I'll probably have an apartment in the city, and years ago that just almost wasn't heard of. Well, Dr. Ray Torto, thanks for joining us today. We sure appreciate your insight and wisdom.
Thank you, Michael. Fun talking with you.
Great.
Good day.
Thank you, sir. And we're going to take a short break here. We'll stay tuned. We'll have more on the demographic impact on business and real estate decisions. I'm Michael Bull. This is the Commercial Real Estate Show. We'll be right back. The Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Florida International University and Bull Realty Commercial Brokerage, a great place to do business. For more information on these companies or to access additional podcasts, videos, or blogs, visit commercialrealestateshow.com.